Welcome to the Sioux City Public Museum's presentation, History at High Noon, Sioux City's Art Deco. So, big question, what is Art Deco? Art Deco is not only a style of architecture, it's a style of visual arts and product design that first appeared in France just before World War I. It peaked in popularity in the United States and Europe between 1920 and 1939. Now, Art Deco was inspired by several ancient cultures, including Mesoamerican, so Central American cultures, Middle Eastern, particularly Egyptian design, Greek and Roman design a little bit less, and it often features shapes from the machine age and contemporary technology. Now that means things like new advancements in technology like radios, airplanes, ocean liners. You'll see elements of Art Deco design draw from these kind of technologies. Common shapes that we're going to see a lot in this presentation, and I'm going to be using the same words over and over again because these things pop up. Common shapes include geometric or abstracted forms, trapezoids, zigzags, chevrons, pyramids, and stepped pyramids. Building materials were also innovated, were also newer and different from earlier styles. So we're going to see things that reflect technology, things like aluminum or stainless steel cladding, colorful glazed ceramics, plastics, chrome, and most of these structures we're going to see were made possible thanks to engineering made possible by reinforced concrete structures. So saying all that, let's take a look. Now, Tom, how could we start here? The Woodbury County Courthouse. Isn't that an icon of Prairie School and Sullivan-esque style architecture? Well, it is. But early on in the design phase, when William Steele was just doing drafts for what might be some of the exterior ornamentation, he came up with this drawing. This sculpture, possible tentative sculpture, was going to be on the west face of the building. And you can see this is not very Prairie School looking. If you look at the sharp angles of the wings, we are kind of looking something already like the airplane. So that is already some influence we see from the age of aviation. And this would be very early in aviation because we're talking about 1915. Now these, of course, are not the final designs. The final designs were those of Alfonso Iannelli. These are the sculptures that would eventually replace Steele's initial concepts. Now, disregarding the very Prairie School Sullivan-esque borders that you see around this sculpture here on the left, if we look at the figures of these people, they're abstracted. I mean, they're natural looking, but there's also, if we can see the waviness to their hair, see the kind of concentric or parallel lines in their clothing. This is all very much more common in Art Deco style architecture, but this is also very early Art Deco, so some of the finer elements have not yet been worked out. And if we also see the generic female figure of the woman that you see there on the right, these would be on the north facade of the Woodbury County Courthouse. We see again similarities to the other sculptures with the waving hair, holding the child. We're not seeing Prairie School, even though the Woodbury County Courthouse is very much a Prairie School style building. So that's very early in Art Deco. Let's move on to the Midland Packing Company, built in 1920. Many of you might be more familiar with this as the former Swift packing plant at 2001 Leach Avenue, designed by K.E. Westerland. Now, overall, we're just looking at the big refrigerated warehouse that was the main portion of that building. You may be familiar with this terracotta form here on the right. This is what's more Art Deco inspired than anything else in the building. I should mention, too, that we have the angularity, the nice geometric form of the Art Deco, but Art Deco also drew some of its influence from the Cubist art movement, and you can see at the bottom of the screen here this kind of beveled square. This is very much informed by Cubist style design, and you'll see quite a bit of that in Art Deco architecture. Emerson Elementary School, built in 1921 on Sioux City's west side, was designed by William Beutler and Ralph Arnold. Now, what we see as Art Deco, why this building is Art Deco, is the influence of the Middle Eastern design. So we see a stepped pyramid, the stepped Egyptian pyramid of Djoser, and you can see the years of his reign, where we have different tiers here in the pyramid, and we see those same kind of stepped elements on these parapet walls above the entrances to this building. So this is going to be a motif we see repeated very often as stepped pyramids. You're going to get sick of me saying it, I almost guarantee. The Orpheum Building, built in 1926, designed by Rapp & Rapp, located at 6th and Pierce Streets. Now, you can clearly see this Orpheum looks much different than the Orpheum we see today. Well, that's because in the 1940s, the building had an additional 4 floors put on the top. But if we look at the original cornice of this building, which we're going to see in the next slide right here, we can see the cornice at the top. We have kind of these geometric undulating lines. And this course right here, you can see the zigzags that I was talking about, which again are very common in Art Deco architecture. Something I'll look at in just a little bit, above this zigzag line and below this top cornice row, you see these stones here are kind of angled. This is emulating the structure of an Egyptian form called a ziggurat. No, we're going to look at that just a little bit more. So that's more of an Egyptian theme that we'll see. Looking, again, continuing looking at the Orpheum Building, the plaques between the windows, so between the multi-story windows, you'll see again this kind of stylized geometric form. We have these X's, and then really simplified, abstracted, natural foliage forms in between. And we also have these triangles or pyramids here in between the spaces of the X. The O.B. McDonald Building was built in 1929 in Morningside at 4012 to 4014 Morningside Avenue. Here again, we see on the tops of pilasters. Now, pilasters are basically columns that are flat, squared up against a building and not standing independently. So these are pilasters. We get this stepped motif here at the top again, that stepped period, and we see that also a little bit along the entire cornice of this structure. The Iowa Bakery was remodeled in 1929. This was located at 813 West 7th Street, and this remodeling was designed by E.R. Swanson. I'll take a look at the architectural drawings here, and you can see, again, along the top of this building, you have these rounded and stepped forms, and these design elements here, we get a little bit of stepped pyramid, and even more at the on these pilasters at the very edge, we see these geometric patterns of the Art Deco. The Rodin apartment building, also known as the Sydney, was built in 1929 at 10th and Pierce, designed by K.E. Westerland. It's one of the Art Deco elements I wanted to look at here, again inspired by Egyptian architecture, is the Jed pillar. So this is an Egyptian Jed pillar here, and you can see above the entrances of the Rodin apartments, we have a Jed pillar decoration. Again, another element of the Art Deco. The Westinghouse Warehouse, formerly located along Dace Avenue, was built in 1929, designed by William Beutler and Ralph Arnold. In the bottom image, you can see this stepped pyramid. When the building had a second floor added, you can still see that stepped pyramid was left in place, and we also get these chevrons just above the main entrance. The Martin Nash Building, built in 1930, located at 710 Nebraska Street. A rather unassuming building, but has some great elements. Above these window bays is this stone trim, which you can see is blown up here, so you can see the zigzag pattern. And then at the top of the pilasters, so here, 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 and here, you can see this design, which I was having trouble finding the origin or what to call this So after a bit of searching, we've kind of at least partially believed this to be the abstract ostrich feathers from Osiris's crown, Atef. And you can see those right here. So again, we have more of this Egyptian influence in Art Deco. The former J.C. Penney building, built in 1930, located on the south side of 4th Street at 410 4th Street. We can see overall the step pattern, and even in these pilasters and this parapet, we get more stepped pyramids. Zooming in on some of these elements, we get these stylized patterns, these really nice geometric forms, not only in this central plaque, but also at the top of these pilasters. In that same block was the Davidson Realty Company building. You can see here it's occupied by Broadkey and Goodsite. This is at the corner of 4th and Douglas. This structure was designed by William Beutler and Ralph Arnold. If we look at the top of the structure, we can see the zigzag lines. We can see these tapered elements on these pilasters, representative of a ziggurat. And again, we'll take a look at that, what a ziggurat is in just a little bit. We get the stepped designs here below these windows, and we have step designs here on these columns. The Warrior Hotel is one of the larger examples of Art Deco architecture in Sioux City. The Warrior was built in 1930, located at 6th and Nebraska Street, designed by Kansas City-based architect Alonzo Gentry. Just looking at the overall structure right off the bat, we can see this is entirely a stepped pyramid. We have a lower level, we have a recess, steps up, we have the tower, and even here at the top, we can see that there's a bit of a step pyramid design even there. On the interior of the Warrior, it's neat to see some interiors of an Art Deco building. What we see here, we have Art Deco design Native American heads in the railings. We have these nice triangular and diamond shapes, typical of Art Deco, and even this frieze below the ceiling is an Egyptian keystone key kind of design. Again, all of this typical of Art Deco. On the exterior, I thought I would take another look, and we can definitely see the steps here. We can see the steps here in the center or on this main terracotta. We can see these diamond pattern grills at the base of each of these windows. I want to zoom in on just a little part here. At the cornice of one of the lower sections of this pyramid, you can see the zigzag lines along the cornice. You can also see these, what I believe are still ostrich feathers, and we still have lots of triangular and angular designs. Looking at the center portion above the entrance along the second floor, we can see these falcons, which we're pretty sure are based on the Egyptian falcon god Horus. We see more of these ostrich feathers. And then these tapered rectangles, so with the beveled edges. So that, again, it kind of hints back to the Cubist art movement. There's a close-up of another of those grills. I think during the restoration of this building, they had one of these grills tucked somewhere, and they just reproduced the rest. So that's a nice little bit of restoration done on that project. You know, it's so nice to talk about the Warrior as an active and restored building, as opposed to how we used to talk about it 4 years ago when people are, anything ever going to happen with that building? It's been empty for 40 years. Well, it's not anymore. The bus depot and hotel was built in 1931 at the corner of 5th and Douglas. This is another Beutler and Arnold project. I want to take a quick look. We have some of the architectural drawings for this building, and I particularly wanted to focus on the one on the top right. We can see the zigzags here along the top, along the cornice, and here above the second floor windows. But this tapered stone here on the parapet wall resembles the lines of a ziggurat, like this ziggurat of Ur. So again, that's just one more Egyptian influence. The M&L Bakery was built in 1931 at 405 Wesley Parkway. This is another Emil Swanson design. Of course, this building is going to be more familiar to you as the home of Palmer Candy's retail shop. One thing we haven't looked at, but we're going to see a lot in the future, and it is a common element of Art Deco design, is a rounded corner, which you can just see the rounded corner right here in the center of this building over the entrance. As we look at some close-ups of the building, we can see at the top we have, again, a stepped pyramid design in these pilasters. Moving in, we're going to take a look at these plaques above the windows. So again, we have these what I believe are ostrich feathers. And in the center, we have a prairie flower or a sunflower design. And if you look closely enough at this building, below the windows on the south facade of the structure, there are these small plaques. They're about 4 by 8 inches. They're not very large, but we can see, again, the geometric patterns, the zigzags of Art Deco design. There are several schools that are in this talk, simply because many of the Sioux City schools were heavily remodeled in the 1930s, and most of that remodeling design was done by William Beutler and Ralph Arnold. So this is the former Cooper Elementary School. It was remodeled in 1931. It's located in Greenville at 2700 Leach Avenue. And what we can see here, once again, is the stepped pyramid motif. The Purslow Building, built in 1931, is kind of one of those hidden buildings downtown that can really easily be ignored. This is at the corner of 6th and Pearl Street. One element we can see in Art Deco architecture are incised or raised horizontal lines. So the upper picture you can see here, along these top course of brick, you can see these raised brick lines. Also in the structure here in the center, you can see there's a bit of a stepped pyramid motif here. And down on these pilasters, we also have a little bit of stepped pyramid design, but these are also tapered at the top, so these look a bit like those ziggurats we just saw. One of the little hidden gems on this building, you can see the plate glass windows on the right side of this image. If you look below that, there's some black tile right down here. As a close-up, here we go. That black tile, I'm sorry the tile was a little bit dirty. I didn't wipe it clean when I took this picture. But you can see this small, it's about a 1-inch tall little zigzag line that is in that ceramic tile work below those first-story windows. Like other schools, Longfellow Elementary School was remodeled in the 1930s. This building was located at 1800 Sioux Trail, designed by Beutler and Arnold. And once again, above the main entrance, we see the stepped pyramid motif. I don't have a great photo of the Olson building, nor do I really have a great image of its architectural drawings, but on one of the columns, on the column on the far right, this ornamentation here is very geometric, very triangular in design, very in keeping with the Art Deco. I have blown that drawing up right here on the left. And it resembles so much of what we have already seen before. The Olson building was built in 1932. It was on the north side of 4th Street there at 315 4th Street and designed by K.E. Westerland. A commercial building, for which I have no name, was built in 1932 on the site of the former P.V. Grand Opera House at the corner of 4th and Jennings Street. 4th and Jones Street. We can see what we've become so familiar with, zigzag lines, and this rather elaborate geometric foliage pattern motif parapet in the center there. The City Garage on Sioux City's west side was built in 1933 at 611 Sioux Street. It was designed by George Hilgers. George Hilgers had partnered with Prairie School architect William Steele here in Sioux City for several years before Steele's departure. We see, once again, we have zigzag lines here above the garage door, as well as our stepped pyramid. We can see that maybe just a little bit better in the architectural drawings. The zigzag patterns here, kind of these little sunburst patterns, and again, the stepped pyramid. Probably, I'm not going to say probably, Sioux City's finest example of Art Deco architecture with a Native American influence is Sioux City's Badge Row building. Opened in 1933, the corner of 4th and Jackson Street. This structure was designed by a name we've become familiar with, Newt Enoch Westerland, and his brother, Carl Westerland, came to Sioux City to help Newt with some of the design elements. Now you'll also see some little insets I put in here. There was a book that came out with the opening of the Badge Row building with designs and layout by Gabriel Isikoff, who himself was an Art Deco themed graphic artist. Looking at some of the details, these are both near between the first and second and third floors of the Badge Row building. Just these fantastic scroll designs, but everything not quite so organic looking. It's very geometric. And then, of course, these really great textures we see in these terracotta panels, this nice sunflower pattern, and these possibly sunshine rays. Hard to know exactly what Newt and Carl Westerland were thinking about when they made that design. Here's another image of the imposing entrance by Gabriel Isikoff, and then Westerland's design above the main entrance. Of course, our Native American theme. We see chevrons. We see stepped pyramids. All about this. And when you have family and friends with a drone, you can get up close and personal with the corners of the Badge Row building. I mean, we can just see the Art Deco designs, things we've all seen before, the geometry, the great crisp, clean lines. But this is way we can get right up and close and personal with something that is 145 feet in the air. So why not take advantage? This is just coming out a little bit. We see this kind, what I almost think of as an arrowhead motif here on the center of the north facade of the Badge Row building. It's very similar to the terracotta work from the Midland packing plant, which you can see there in the upper left-hand corner. And again, with availability of great drone shots, we get this nice view of the east facade of the Badge Row building. Stepped pyramids, these great armor vests that these Native American figures are wearing, the great headdresses, the very strong facial features here of these Native American designs. The Federal Building is another great example of Art Deco in Sioux City. We're going to take a look. This is some of the original design that Beutler and Arnold produced of the main entrance, and this is far more Art Deco looking than the building would eventually become. We see so many of the scroll works, the ostrich feather motifs that we've seen before. These are actually not in place on this building as it exists today or as it was initially constructed. We look to the top of the Federal Building, and we can see the stepped pyramid design. And this also shows these ornamentation plaques. These are not present on the Federal Building, but they were initially designed to be there. Looking at the top of the pilasters between the windows on this building, we get another bit of Egyptian influence. The top of these columns, the way they fan out like this is reminiscent of papyrus, papyrus being a major product of the ancient Egyptian culture. a plant that was turned into paper. We see more, between the window plaques, we see more papyrus here. This is what you see depicted here is a papyrus amulet from Tutankhamun's tomb. So you can see this fan design. That's how important this plant was to Egyptian culture and how it influenced design of the Art Deco. More papyrus design in these bronze windows above the main entrance to the federal building. Light fixtures also designed with some of these Art Deco and Egyptian motifs, and a bit of a bas-relief done in an Art Deco style. Again, we have this nice geometric form. It's fairly abstracted. You can tell it's an eagle, but it's not a super realistic eagle. And even the railings are designed in keeping with Art Deco. Again, we have chevrons, triangles, and in this repeating pattern. Moving to the interior of the building, I'm kind of approaching, there's a neat thing that's going to happen about in just a few minutes in this talk. We're starting to see more of these curved forms in these stairwells. We are going to see lots of curved forms in a subset of Art Deco architecture. Just a little bit of an advance notice on that. Some smaller buildings, the Barnsdall Service Station, built in 1934, was located at 3rd and Pearl Street. Again, we see incised lines, and we see stepped pyramid forms repeating. The Insurance Exchange Building was built in 1917 with a Sullivan-esque style entrance. Somewhere in the 1930s, the original entrance was replaced with an Art Deco designed entrance. You can see with this tapered diamond, this is a little bit of that cubist notion, and we can see this is kind of a black marble, very much would be very common in Art Deco. And again, we see the zigzag lines here in bronze or copper. I'm not quite sure which. There were a few houses in Sioux City that had Art Deco influence, or very much Art Deco. This is the John Kelly House, built in 1935, located at 3439 Jennings Street. And I don't think I have to say, it's definitely a stepped pyramid. The Richard Atherton House was built in 1935 at 4401 Perry Way. It was designed by K.E. Westerland. Now this house has been razed. It's no longer standing. But one of the influences I mentioned very early on in this talk was that of sea ships, of these large ocean-going vessels. And as you look at this house, you may see what I see kind of looks like the superstructure of a ship. We have the pilot's house, and we have a smokestack, and all of this looks like, if you just put a boat underneath it, this would be what is on top. The Katz Building, built in 1935 at the corner of 4th and Pierce, was designed by William Beutler and Ralph Arnold. Along the second floor cornice of this building, we see the zigzags we see these horizontal lines. And not only is the building Art Deco, but so is the giant billboard on the roof of the building with a massive stepped pyramid design there. The Grandview Park Bandshell, built in 1935 and designed by Henry L. Kampfeffner. We were talking about technology and how Art Deco was influenced by technology and vice versa. Because this building's main function is music, and how do we transmit music in this era? It's by radio, and if we look from above, we have what is essentially a giant radio speaker. Drones are pretty cool. Also, Art Deco bas-reliefs done by the Federal Artists Project. These were made by Herschel Ellarth. He was head of the Iowa Federal Artists Project. He made plaster casts of these two musical figures, and they were sent to Sioux City and installed on the front of the Grandview Park band shell. The Abraham H. Barron House on East Solway Street. This was designed by K.E. Westerland. This is, I think, the last of the Art Deco or Streamline Moderne houses that we have in this presentation. And this building, like the Atherton House that we saw, is clad in stucco. Now, stucco is another common exterior material for Art Deco style houses, at the very least. The KSEJ transmitting station, just north of town, was built in 1936 in kind of rural Leeds. This is another Beutler and Arnold building. But here we get to see above the KSCJ name plaque here, we have a stepped pyramid and the zigzag lines. Here are the architectural drawings where we can see those maybe just a little bit more clearly, the stepped pyramid and zigzag lines. The Badgerow building was about to have a twin. This is a proposed Lytle Investment Company building designed in 1936 by the same architect of the Badgerow building, K.E. Westerland. This building was to be located at the southwest corner of 5th and Pierce Streets. You can see, even though this is a rather poor quality newspaper image, you kind of see the overall shape of the Badgerow building. But what could have been very different, this building one of the options for the exterior of this building was to be clad in aluminum. So all the design, all the ornamentation would have been in aluminum, and it was designed to be anywhere between 8 and 14 stories. This is shown as an 8-story building. Unfortunately, funds for that building did not amount to very much, and the project was canceled, or it was at least shrunk. What ended up being placed at that corner was this other Art Deco Streamline Moderne building that you can see right here, designed by K.E. Westerland. There's a modern image of it from Google Maps up here on the top. Leeds Fire Station number 7 was built in 1937 on Floyd Boulevard. This was another George Hilger's project. We can see a bit of the stepped pyramid motif at the top of these pilasters, and of course, probably this ostrich feather design here on either of these pilasters. The Perkins apartment, built in 1938 at the corner of 9th and Jackson Street, designed by George Hilgers. Once again, what we see here as our big Art Deco motif is the stepped pyramid design. Now, this building today does not resemble this because we have a flat roof building, and some people, construction people, know that sometimes flat roofs are not a great idea. So this today has a pitched roof placed over it, and these gaps in the brick are all filled in, so you really can't tell this was, at one time, an Art Deco building. Something a little bit different. We've kind of touched on rounded corners, which we see here, and a corner like this with glass block rounded corners. We're about to move in to a subset of Art Deco, and that is Streamline Moderne, or simply Streamline. I've already kind of hinted at the Streamline just a little bit. So Streamline is a variant of Art Deco that emerged in the 1930s. This was thought of by industrial designers who really just kind of took the Art Deco style and stripped it of ornamentation. It was inspired, like other Art Deco, by aerodynamic design, emphasis on curving forms, long horizontal lines, and nautical elements, so seafaring elements. Typical design elements of this style include rounded corners, glass block, porthole windows, flat roofs, and horizontal grooves or lines in walls. Our next example has all of that. This is the former Hobson Elementary School at the corner of Floyd and Dace, 216 South Floyd Street, designed by William Beutler and Ralph Arnold. We can see this building has a rounded corner, glass block windows. Way over here, there's still that stepped pyramid motif that's hanging on. And then these brick that protrude out from the surface creating these horizontal lines. There are 2 lines here along the top, and a couple right here on the curve. There was a new Webster Elementary School built in 1938 at the site of the old one at 417 Market Street. The structure was designed by William Beutler and Ralph Arnold. We can see above the main entrance, which is that small color photo on the top, we again get the stepped motif, and we get some X's or zigzag lines in that cornice. Leeds High School is a very similar design to Webster. They were designed by the same architectural team a year apart. So that makes sense, right? Leeds High School was formerly located at 3919 Jefferson Street. It was a Beutler and Arnold design. Above the main entrance to Leeds High School, you can see the chevrons put in place near the top of that building. Again, reminiscent of other Art Deco we've seen throughout this talk. The Piggly Wiggly, built in 1939 at the corner of 20th and Pierce, is depicted here as a Council Oak food store, but we can see the rounded corner of this building over here. Art Deco and Streamline Moderne were both very commonly used in buildings for transportation infrastructure, things like bus stations, things like gas stations, and in Sioux City's case, an airport terminal. While this is fairly well stripped and not super elaborate, we can see here on the Municipal Airport Terminal building a small step pyramid above that building's entrance. Just a block away from here is the former General Tobacco Company building, built in 1940, located at 412 Jones Street. We see the nice rounded corner. We see glass block. Public School Stadium, what some of you may know as Roberts Stadium or today Elwood Olson Stadium, was opened in 1940 at 3000 Vine Avenue. That structure overall was built by William Beutler and Ralph Arnold. It was largely a WPA project as well, but if we look at the lower image, the wall on the eastern edge of that stadium, we see the stepped pyramid, we see incised lines. These happen to be vertical. We zoomed in just a little bit here so you can see the step pattern just a little bit better in that small inset up above. Some buildings never came to fruition. This was a proposed municipal building, 1940. It was designed or drawn by George Vandenbrink, who was a Sioux City Journal artist. It's not hard to see what makes this building Art Deco here. We have the stepped pyramid design and use of glass block here, and of course the stepped pattern of the stepped pyramid, which is all over this structure. The Singing Tower in Memorial Park Cemetery was built in 1941, designed by K.E. Westerland. When looking at this, of course, the base of this structure, which has entire rounded sides and all implemented in glass block. The Grayson Building downtown at 4th and Douglas was remodeled in 1942. It's difficult to see in this image, but at the top of each of these rather subtle pilasters is a bit of a stepped pyramid. Another proposed design, this is the K.E. Westerland proposed City Hall design, 1944. Again, the stepped pyramid is evident. This is actually one of the great small buildings, this Great Lakes Pipeline Administration building built in 1945. We get so many elements of the Streamline Moderne, it's almost a perfect little example. Rounded corners, glass block that also rounds the corner. We've got a little bit of a step pyramid here over the front door, and porthole windows. Remember that nautical theme. When Security National Bank moved into this structure in 1945, they remodeled the first floor, which had prior to this just been large plate glass windows. We can see this zigzag line right here, which you can kind of see right through here. A proposed remodeling to the old YMCA building. The old YMCA building that you can see there in the upper left was built in 1893. They were looking at either remodeling their old building or moving to a new one. So below, from an unknown artist, is as if the YMCA building had been bumped up into the 1940s. This rounded corner, glass block windows, all sorts of design elements that we've seen before. Duke's Radio building, built in 1946 at 209 6th Street. This is nice because we get to see some diversity of materials. We have this great cream-colored glazed tile and this deep brown tile, and we see the stepped pyramid design around the main entrance. Of course, these lines continue all the way around the front and partial sides of the structure. Joe Gantz's Steakhouse, located at 13th and Pierce, designed by William Beutler. Glass block windows, rounded corners. Well, that's not so much a pyramid as just a little block, but we also have these horizontal lines. Roe Dairy, very similar in design, mostly the rounded corner and glazed tile exterior. This is a proposed remodeling of the Davidson Brothers Company building back in 1946. That structure was located at 4th and Pierce, had been built over stages between 1903 to 1910. William Beutler had proposed an entirely Art Deco design for the exterior of that department store. Initial designs for Alley Gymnasium on the Morningside College campus from 1948 are very Art Deco looking, particularly the angles of this edge along with these small towers here. The result was just a little bit different, but still an Art Deco design. The roof is rounded instead of pitched, but most of this main facade is intact as it looked. Now, this is just my speculation. This is something that we're going to see in a handful more of William Beutler buildings. These columns, right here, we're going to see this form appear in a few more buildings, and to me, it almost resembles the smokestack of a steamship. So just bear that in mind, because that's what I'm going to call it. When Memorial Stadium opened in the 1940s, the original design for its main entrance had an Art Deco feeling to it. Again, the stepped pyramid idea. Memorial Stadium was originally designed by William Beutler. It was going to be a baseball stadium, and it just very quickly thereafter turned into a football stadium. The Metz Bakery building at 1500 Lewis Boulevard was designed by W.E. Long Company out of Chicago, Illinois. We're going to dive down and take a closer look. And what we've seen before, nice rounded corners, a little bit of a stepped pyramid motif. This was a proposed addition to St. Vincent Hospital from 1948, drawn by William Beutler. This would have been at 6th and Jones Street. You can see on the upper part the original, or one of the early St. Vincent Hospital. Here's the addition. We can see stepped pyramid design, and maybe not glass block, but certainly windows that have very small panes. The old Sears Roebuck and Company downtown was built in 1948, designed by William Beutler. It was at 306 Pierce Street, and again, we see our stepped pyramid. Watson Brothers Freight Terminal was built in 1948 designed by William Beutler. This is located at 1619 11th Street. We can see the rendering that appeared in the newspaper and what it eventually turned out to be. We have this rounded, this half cylinder over the main entrance, and we also have these windows with small panes, kind of like glass block, and wrapping around the corner of this structure. The Atlas Supermarket, built in 1949, was located at 11th and Court Street. Here again, we have this element of the Art Deco, which we've seen just a little bit, which are highly contrasting colors of this probably a cream colored glazed tile and a dark, probably black or dark brown glazed tile. The Milwaukee Railroad Depot, when it was remodeled in 1949, originally had a bit of a Streamline Moderne flair with these incised or raised brick courses here and a small bit of a step pyramid. This building did, after looking at this building recently, it does not have those elements, but they were in the design once upon a time. The Call Bond and Mortgage Company building, built in 1949 at the corner of 7th and Jackson Street. It was occupied by Siouxland Kitchens and television engineering. We can see our familiar rounded corner. Downtown, the F.W. Woolworth Company building was completed in 1949. It was located at 417 4th Street. From the very outset, we can see these great lines. This is altogether a great Streamline Moderne nameplate above the first floor entrances. And at the top, we see our stepped pyramid return. We're going to zoom in just a little bit, and at the corners of this building, we can see the zigzags with which we become so familiar. And above the window panels, we can see this very sharply geometric cornstalk and American flag. That's kind of neat. On West 7th Street, 723 West 7th, is Dick's Diner, or as is depicted here, Archie's Diner. This is kind of the embodiment of Streamline Moderne. This is what Streamline Moderne was based on, which was largely transportation. So this is essentially a railroad car or a streetcar kind of design. We have aluminum roof, a lot of aluminum cladding. We have rounded corners implemented in glass block. The Municipal Auditorium is a really great example of the Streamline Moderne design. We get to see just a little bit of everything. We still retain the stepped pyramid notion. We have glass block windows here in these cylindrical ramp ways. I was going to say stairways, but I really can't say stairways because you may know that there are ramps inside of these instead of stairs. Zooming in just a little bit at the top of the building, again, it's great to know a person with a drone. We can see these little triangle motifs, zigzag motifs, and again, the oh-so-common stepped pyramid. Heelan High School. We're drawing to the tail end of Streamline Moderne. We have the rounded corner. Over here in the stairwell is glass block. And here is that pilaster column thing that I mentioned earlier on Alley Gym that's kind of starting to look like a big smokestack. I know it's not a smokestack, but it resembles one. The Central High School Annex, designed by William Beutler, located at 1120 Nebraska Street. You can see on the bottom there is a drawing from the newspaper to what it would look like, so you get an idea. But the north facade of this building is just great because we get these columns with the steps pyramid. We have these nice long bands of glass block. The Jewish Community Center, built in 1950, another Beutler project, this at 14th in Nebraska. On the top, you can see Beutler's original notions of how this building could be put together. We have a rounded corner here with rounded glass block windows. And we see our little smokestack over here again, and we're looking at the real structure, we still see the smokestack. We see glass block here above this entrance, as well as in these areas, which is where the gym in that building is located. The Sanford Center, a much more modest stepped pyramid design, but at the top of these pilasters, we can see the step pyramid again. This is at 1700 Geneva Street. The Half Moon Inn, with its rounded corners, its raised horizontal lines and glass block, is all about Streamline Moderne. And finally, in addition to the Lutheran Hospital in 1952 at 27th and Pierce Streets, we can see our familiar friend, the stepped pyramid, both here above the main entrance and at the top of this structure. So I want to thank you all for joining me and seeing lots and lots of pictures of Art Deco and Streamline Moderne buildings. Thank you so much all for coming and braving this winter day.